Hello, my name is Mariah, and today I'm going to be presenting my research on the comparison of methadone and buprenorphine to treat opioid addiction. So to start off, I'm going to go over an introduction of opioid use disorder and describe its general characteristics. So people use psychoactive drugs for many different reasons. Opium has been used for the relief of pain for thousands of years. Many opioid drugs are still derived from opium, while others are created by scientists in the lab. There is an undeniable value in using opioids for the treatment of acute or chronic pain. However, opioids are progressively being prescribed more and more outside of their intended use. The opioid crisis costs the United States billions of dollars every single year. On average, the economic liability of opioid misuse is projected to be more than $78 billion every single year in the United States. And this study was specifically done in 2018, so I'm sure reflecting on a study from 2024, it would be much higher. The misuse of opioids can be explained by evaluating the central role of reward mechanisms. So upon consumption, opioids attach to proteins called opioid receptors, which are located on nerve cells throughout the body. When this happens, the opioids block pain signals that are sent from the body into the brain. Simultaneously, neuronal pathways called reward circuits play a central role in compulsive drug taking and addiction. The neurobiology of opioid addiction involves a number of brain regions, but one of the primary regions is thought to be the mesocortical limbic system. The system responds to rewards that are fundamental to the individual. Drugs such as opioids can function as rewards, but the mesocortical limbic system was not designed to handle chronic consumption of opioids. Thus, addiction could be viewed as a pathological alteration of brain mechanisms that impact reward-related learning and memory. So what we know, I attached to my slides just a little rundown with different facts that are really important to put into consideration when it comes to looking at the opioid epidemic as a whole. So 70,630 people died from drug overdose in 2019. 1.6 million people had an opioid use disorder in the past year. 745,000 people used heroin in the past year. 1.6 million people misuse prescription pain relievers for the first time. And I'm not going to go over every single fact, but there are a few others that should be noted. One that I thought was really interesting is that 10.1 million people misuse prescription opioids in the past year. A lot of opioid addiction and the start of addiction does come from doctors that are prescribing opioids for chronic or acute pain, which is something important to put into consideration. How addiction works, that's something that we previously mentioned. Addiction is a chronic condition that involves compulsive seeking and consumption of a drug despite harmful consequences. As previously mentioned, the mesocortical limbic system is a primary source of that reward circuit that's adjusted when opioids are consumed. So in general, the job of an opioid is to block the pain signals that are sent from the body to the brain, which gives that euphoric feeling and release of tension or pain in the body. So essentially, when you're looking at the main purpose and job of what an opioid does, opioids can hijack the pleasure/reward circuit in the brain and hook you into wanting more and more, which is how addiction does develop. So there are a few symptoms of opioid dependence that are important to put into consideration. Physical dependence is the main one, and that's where your body continuously wants more and more of the specific drug, and that's how tolerance continues to build up, and that's how dependence continues to develop. Other symptoms are focused on cravings, weight loss, changes in sleep habits, and lack of hygiene. So there are a few different treatment methods that you can utilize to treat opioid addiction, but the two primary treatment methods that you hear a lot about in research are methadone and buprenorphine. So the first treatment method that we're going to go over is the treatment of methadone. So methadone was introduced as an opioid replacement therapy in the 1960s. It's known to eliminate the euphoric appeal of opioids, and there are multiple positive benefits of selecting this treatment method. Methadone is long-acting, orally effective, medically safe, and compatible with normal performance and work in school. This is a big factor for a lot of people because you want to make sure that you're selecting a treatment that's not going to interfere with your every single day life. The one thing about methadone that is a little bit different from other treatments is you do have to go to a clinic every single day and get it administered under the supervision of a therapist or a clinician. That can interfere with work and school schedules at times, but overall it's a pretty good method to select because it doesn't interfere with your functioning level in work and school environments. So methadone is a full opioid agonist, which means that there are concerns about overdose-related death that should be put into consideration. When taken orally, methadone has a quick onset of action. Effects of methadone occur 15 to 45 minutes after administration, and peak concentrations occur at approximately 2.5 to 4 hours. There are multiple ways to administer methadone, which makes it a convenient treatment. The three main options are it can be administered orally, rectally, or through intramuscular injection. With rectal administration, the absolute bioavailability is 76% compared to 86% with oral administration. So overall, rectal administration is absorbed quicker and has a longer mean duration of action. When it comes to intramuscular injection, the peak concentration depends on the location of the injection. On average, the peak plasma concentration of methadone after injection is 2.5 to 4 hours approximately. So when consuming methadone, patients, as previously mentioned, have to go to that specialized clinic, so that can be a little bit of a barrier for some individuals that are taking methadone. But before we're jumping into the barriers, I do want to discuss the primary benefits of methadone. Overall, with most treatments that are targeting opioid addiction, it does reduce opioid cravings, it provides structure and routine. This can be looked at as an advantage or a disadvantage depending on the individual and the structure of their everyday life. It reduces withdrawal symptoms, which is very convenient for individuals that are trying to avoid that when getting off of opioids. And overall, it improves the quality of life. As previously mentioned, it can be consumed and equivalent to normal functioning at work and school, which can improve the overall quality of the individual's life when they're trying to overcome opioid addiction. Moving into the disadvantages, there's a lot of negative side effects associated with methadone. Some of these side effects can be a barrier for individuals that do want a treatment method. Even though it's effective, they might not want to deal with these symptoms. There's also the risk of overdose. Just because it is a full agonist, it means that there's continuous effects, which can leave people wanting more, and addiction is a possibility, and so is overdose. And lastly, time consuming. As much as it's a benefit to have that extra supervision when getting treatment, it is time consuming when you're having to take daily trips to the clinic. This primarily becomes a significant barrier for individuals that don't live near a clinic. So some individuals will cross state lines to get treatment, and some will travel hours just to get to their closest clinic that offers methadone, which is a significant barrier for people who aren't living in a city and they're living in rural areas. One specific study I wanted to mention evaluated why individuals don't enter methadone treatment programs. I really like the results of this study because I felt like it captured a bigger picture and it could help us understand why people wouldn't select this treatment even though it's effective. So the study included 26 opioid-dependent adults who met the criteria for methadone maintenance that were recruited from the streets of Baltimore. The results indicated that there are multiple barriers of treatment that restrict individuals from seeking help. These barriers included wait lists, lack of money, lack of health insurance, no photo identification card, or fear of withdrawal symptoms. So what I got out of this research study is that there's more reasons other than just like the symptoms or the side effects from methadone that could be causing a barrier to treatment. And I think it's a really good perspective to look into that some of these individuals don't have health insurance and they might not have that identification documents or like a license to even get accepted to a treatment center and receive methadone. Moving on, the next treatment method that I want to look into is buprenorphine. So buprenorphine is a synthetic opioid developed in the late 1960s as well, and it's used to treat pain or opioid use disorder. Buprenorphine is used as an agonist substitution treatment, which means that the drug substitutes a more potent agonist opioid with a less potent opioid. So buprenorphine, unlike methadone, is a partial agonist, which means that it produces euphoric effects at low to moderate doses. Due to its unique profile, buprenorphine is great for use as an opioid replacement therapy. For opioid use disorder, buprenorphine works as a maintenance treatment with a long duration of action. There are 3 different phases during treatment, which are the induction phase, the stabilization phase, and the maintenance phase. So moving on to benefits, there are a few benefits for buprenorphine. I would say the one significant benefit is that there is lower abuse potential. So of course with all drugs it is possible to overdose, but the percentage of likelihood to overdose is much lower in buprenorphine than it is methadone, which is a really attractive benefit for individuals that are looking for treatment methods. Another benefit is the ceiling effect, which means that instead of continuously getting more and more of the effects, it sort of fades out over time. And once the individual hits a certain threshold, it doesn't go past that, which is really important and also plays a part into why the chances of overdose are relatively low. And then similar to methadone, it does prevent and reduce withdrawal symptoms, which is really important for individuals that are really trying to avoid that. So for disadvantages of buprenorphine, a lot of research has actually shown that there's low retention rates for buprenorphine, which is a significant disadvantage if you're looking for something that's effective. One study demonstrated specifically that after 180 days, only 48% of participants stuck with their intervention when it came to buprenorphine. And then there's higher retention rates for methadone, which makes it a little bit more appealing. Another disadvantage is the side effects. Similar to methadone, there are some negative side effects that can be associated with this treatment, and lack of supervision. Lack of supervision is a disadvantage for individuals that need a lot of structure and need a lot of support in regards to their treatment. So if an individual is picking or selecting a treatment like buprenorphine, it might not be a good idea if they don't have that determination, they don't have that consistency of implementing the treatment independently on their own, just because they're not going to have a supervisor there and they don't need to show up at the clinic every single day to get that extra support. So here I made a chart. It's methadone versus buprenorphine. So now we're just looking at the comparisons because they are very similar, but at the same time they're very different in their own ways. This chart I got from a research study that I was looking into, and I found it really beneficial just doing comparing and contrasting of the benefits. So methadone, as we can see, is a full opioid agonist, and overdose-related deaths are a significant problem. When looking at buprenorphine, it's a partial opioid agonist, and it's a newer method of treatment compared to methadone. So when looking for an opioid replacement therapy, there is an advantage in buprenorphine compared to methadone. Buprenorphine has a 36 to 38 hour half-life compared to methadone, which has a 24 to 36 hour half-life. Additionally, buprenorphine is not as potent as a full agonist, which means that it causes less euphoria when compared to methadone. So less euphoria, it's important to mention, can act as a barrier for patients who prefer a high. So for patients with high levels of physical dependency, they may not be satisfied with the results of buprenorphine treatment. As a partial agonist, buprenorphine will not have increasing effects after a certain point. So buprenorphine may be tolerated better for patients with lower levels of physical dependency due to the fact that it has less euphoric effects. Buprenorphine also causes less respiratory depression than methadone due to its ceiling effects, which means it has lower overdose potential. As previously mentioned, this is a significant benefit for individuals who do struggle with management and are worried about the potential risk of overdosing on their treatment medication. Another interesting find is when comparing methadone and buprenorphine on pregnant women. Buprenorphine is a preferred treatment selection. Buprenorphine carries less risk than methadone for increasing neonatal abstinence syndrome. Additionally, buprenorphine pregnancies exhibit higher birth weights and shorter hospital stays. Due to the decreased risk of inducing neonatal abstinence syndrome, buprenorphine is a better treatment option for pregnant women. Another important factor that's not necessarily listed on here is the cost effectiveness of each drug. So buprenorphine and methadone are effective treatment methods, but economic concerns are often a barrier. A previous research study evaluated the cost of buprenorphine for 606 patients and the cost of methadone for 8,191 patients. During a 6-month evaluation, the cost of methadone was slightly higher than buprenorphine. And despite the higher cost of medication, research demonstrated that buprenorphine treatment was no more expensive than methadone treatment. So when selecting a treatment for opioid addiction, many patients evaluate if the treatment will be covered by insurance. Thankfully, after conducting my research, I found that the expansion of Medicaid really helped out with insurance coverage, and there is more coverage than ever before for both methadone and buprenorphine. So after comparing the two, I want to jump to the conclusion. A lot of people may be wondering which treatment is better if we were to select methadone or buprenorphine. but really the answer depends on the individual. They are both effective treatments, but there's different factors that we need to put into consideration. So when selecting a treatment method, factors such as dependency, location, health insurance, and physiological characteristics would need to be evaluated. And regardless of what treatment is selected, both treatments are equally as effective at helping people recover from addiction.